let's start. Hello and welcome to the Green Cooling Summit 2026. A very, very warm welcome to all the speakers and participants and colleagues and partners joining us from, I guess, around the world. We will figure that out later. We are very, very glad to have you here with us today. My name is Julika Schmitz and I will guide you through the summit today and tomorrow. But before we start the official program, let me first explain the interpretation settings, because if you would like to follow the event in Spanish or French, interpretation is available. So let me quickly show you how you can switch to the translation. You can see a globe icon on the bottom left of your screen. And there you can select the French or the Spanish language channel. And there you can also adjust the volume. Let us know in the chat if it's not working out and we will get back to you. And we will start with some housekeeping notes because we want you to know that this summit is being recorded. And of course, your microphone will remain muted during the presentations. And you are more than welcome to use the chat at any time for questions or comments. And when you do so, you can ask your questions in French or Spanish, and some of your questions will be translated by our team so that later I can take your questions to the speakers at the end of the sessions during our Q&A. And if you're facing any technical difficulties, please just try to leave the summit and then rejoin again. And if there's no solution, please feel free to contact us. And with that said, let me welcome you once again to the Green Cooling Summit 2026, hosted by the German Environment Agency and GSZ Pro Klima on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, and the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. So this year we are asking a very direct question. Too green to scale? Why is R290, so propane, still struggling in room air conditioning, and how can we make it the standard? So over the next 2 days, we will focus on R290 room air conditioning and the practical question behind it. If efficient and climate-friendly solutions already exist, what is still holding back the large-scale deployment? And what can help us move faster? And we do have a very rich agenda ahead of us with excellent inputs, country perspectives and practical examples, and space for discussion. So before we dive into the welcome remarks, let me quickly talk to you about how to use the chat. So we do encourage you to write down your questions. And at the end of each session, except the keynote session, the team in the background is going to select the most wanted questions for me to read them out to the speakers. So if you really like a question that you see in the chat, please vote the question, highlight the question by just giving a thumb up to the respective question, and then it's more likely for me to pick that exact question. But we will come to that later. With that said, I am delighted to invite Professor Dr. Dirk Messner, the President of the German Environment Agency, to give his welcome remarks. So please join me on the virtual stage, Dirk Messner, and then the floor is yours.
Very good. I'm on the floor now?
You are.
Very good. Wonderful. So, distinguished representatives, dear Mrs. Hoven, liebe Ingrid, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good afternoon and good evening to all of you, wherever you are currently. Welcome to the Green Cooling Summit 2026. Thank you very much for joining the 5th edition of our event, jointly organized, as has been already said, by the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, and the German Environment Agency, my own organization, on behalf of the German Ministry for the Environment and Climate. We will focus during the next hours on the building sector once again, and we will take a deep dive into the questions why natural refrigerants are still of minor prevalence in room and building air conditioning appliances and plants, and secondly, why they still struggle to replace hydrofluorocarbons, which harm the environment and the climate at the same time. Why aren't we making progress in a situation in which the technical solutions are actually already there? I do not want to drop too many numbers here, but mentioning this one cannot be avoided. Roughly 90 million single-split air conditioners are sold each year worldwide. And with China and the US, the United States being the most important markets for those. It is expected that these numbers will go further up with a growth rate similar to the one observed during the last 20 years. This means that an estimated 60 million tons of CO2 equivalents are added to the refrigerant banks every year due to the use of HFCS, with the lion's share turning into emissions eventually. For many years, UBA and other partners, we have been fighting for the replacement of HFCs with natural refrigerants, with some excess in many areas. However, when it comes to the room and building air conditioning equipment, only a negligible fraction, only a small fraction is equipped with climate-friendly natural refrigerants, such as R290 so far. So we need to act, we need to move forward. Why is this the case? Why do R290 single-split air conditioners do not experience their breakthrough in the world markets in this moment? Even though the technology, as has been said already, is available from several manufacturers and the worldwide phase down of HFCs is a done deal. There are multiple answers, obviously, under different perspectives, which we are going to discuss during the next sessions during the conference itself. But I would like to spotlight three aspects which are of major importance. Financing of sustainable room air conditioning is number one. Policies to enable the transformation of air conditioning is number two. And safety issues is parameter number three, I would like to focus on briefly. To begin with the latter, safety. Safety of cooling appliances is a crucial issue and has been discussed extensively already in the past. Nevertheless, we will continue the debate regarding building codes as well as safety standards and training around those, especially regarding flammable refrigerants such as R290. So this is an issue we are going to debate and dive deeper during the next hours in which we are working together. Secondly, policies, incentives. Secondly, establishing legislative instruments which tackle higher refrigerants with a global warming potential are main drivers for transitioning to climate-friendly products. This year, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Kigali Amendment to the Protocol of Montreal, which sets a clear signal that the availability of HFCs will dramatically decline by mid-century and pave the way for alternatives to take over. In addition to that, we will make the case how minimum energy performance standards and other types of incentives impact the cooling sector positively. The role of instruments, the role of incentives. Last but not least, we will have a look at the question of the financing and how to overcome barriers, financial barriers mainly, for green cooling in this field. We will address the impact of incentives for investments and the implementation of cooling as a service models. With this quick overlook over some elements of the summit program, I wish us all and you an interesting event with new insights and fruitful discussions and the advancements of environmental-friendly cooling solutions. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dirk Messner, for opening our summit this year and for dropping at least some of the really crucial numbers. And yes, let's celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Kigali Amendment. Thank you very much, Mr. Messner. I'm very pleased to welcome Ingrid-Gabriela Hoven, who is the Managing Director of GIZ. So please join me on the virtual stage, and then I can hand over to you to start your welcoming remarks. Hello. Maybe we are having some transmission problems.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Welcome.
Perfect. Yeah, actually the picture is a little bit frozen, but I would like to continue. So many thanks first to the president of the German Environment Agency, dear Dirk. It's really always a pleasure to inaugurate the Green Cooling Summit as we have done in previous years. And let me start by actually thanking the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Climate Action, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, which has actually supported through the International Climate Initiative, the cooling sector and the cooling transformation in many countries, as well as also the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And finally, also let me thank the German Environment Agency and GIZ Pro Klima for organizing this important summit. I think we still have transmission problems, but I would continue, moderator.
Yes, yes, please do so. We can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah. So perhaps let me start by saying a few words about GIZ, the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, and why we are working in the sector, why we consider this as a very important contribution to achieve the SDGs. And we know that climate change is actually a driver of social inequality and a key threat to security in the 21st century. And therefore, we think in order to preserve stable and robust and promising livelihoods for all people around the world, it's so important that we actually accelerate the transition to a climate neutral and environmentally friendly economy and society. And we, of course, as GIZ, we are working in many sectors, on e-mobility, on the green economy, on climate adaptation, but also especially in all those sectors that are crucial really to decrease the global greenhouse gas emissions. And as Dirk has already mentioned a couple of numbers, of course, the cooling sector is an important factor. And nowadays it counts to around 7.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So this is really an important sector. And we have been working on green cooling for the last 30 years. Last year, the program Pro Klima celebrated 30 years of being at the forefront of ozone and climate protection. And we have supported more than 340 projects worldwide. And we have achieved really a reduction of 120 million CO2 tons equivalents. And this is, again, if you compare this to the emission of coal-fired plants, it's the equivalent of 30 of such plants. So this is a huge contribution to climate protection and to climate resilience. I think this summit provides a unique opportunity to look deeper into best practices, into innovation and new opportunities. Dirk Messner has already spoken about the high number of single split air conditions that are actually sold worldwide each year. And due to, global warming and heat and extreme weather events, we are going to see that more people are going to be inclined to use air conditioners. And it is perhaps in some regions also desperately needed. So how can we make sure that actually we use the technique that's already available, especially natural refrigerants in those new split AC or chillers that would actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And we still see that it takes more so that it can take off. So we are not yet there. And I hope that this summit actually can provide you with some insights. What is needed? What kind of financial instruments are already available? What kind of enabling environment or regulation should you put in place so that people actually are incentivized to pick this new and more climate-friendly technology up? And especially, I think, when it comes to implementation, it's also good that you have a chance throughout the summit to exchange experiences, the good ones, but also perhaps bottlenecks and stumbling blocks that you have experienced in your implementation. I simply want to close by saying this is a super important subject also for the future. It's super important that we scale up efforts and that we find the right incentive systems and solutions that can make sure that we act more in a more speedy way on the climate resilience that is being needed. Thank you so much for participating to this Green Cooling Summit, for your commitment to make a difference, and actually to this fight against emissions. Thank you so much, and back to the moderator.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ingrid-Gabriela Hoven, for setting the scope and setting the scene for this summit today and tomorrow. And thank you for emphasizing that, yes, it's a super important topic. And now we are going to welcome our speaker for our keynote speech for this year's summit. And we will hear that Yosr Allouche is going to set the frame for the summit and give us the bigger picture. And she will introduce one of the central questions behind our program today. So, despite all the actions already taken, why is the transformation to green cooling in buildings still lagging behind? As I mentioned already, after that keynote, there will be no Q&A session, but we are really happy to welcome Dr. Yosr Allouche, who's the Director General of the International Institute of Refrigeration. So welcome, Yosr. I'm so happy that you are here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julika. Yes, thank you, Julika. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, ProClima, inviting IIR, and thank you for the relevance of this topic for this year's summit. Today, I would like to share some reflections on the role of R290 that it can play into the transition into sustainable and clean room air conditioning under the Kigali Amendment, and being one of the keys that we can deliver to the Kigali for the efficient room air conditioning. Next, please. So what is interesting today is that the discussion around the low GWP refrigerants, they became very mature. A few years ago, if we follow the discussion, much of the debate was focused mainly around the environmental impact, but today the discussions, they became more and more broader. We are looking at things like costs, like energy efficiency. Now we hear more and more about PFAS PFAS concerns, energy demand and energy system performance over the full life cycle. And when we look at hydrocarbons from that perspective, we know that they are extremely attractive. They are known ozone depleting potential. They have no ozone depleting potential. They have low GWP, and technically, we know that hydrocarbons, they have excellent thermodynamic properties. For example, they have a low pressure ratio between both condensing and evaporating pressure. So the compressor needs less effort to compress the refrigerant, and then less effort means less energy consumption. They are non-corrosive and they present excellent oil compatibility as well. So for these reasons, among others, the hydrocarbons are considered as excellent alternatives in many applications, and they can even deliver efficiency levels comparable to synthetic refrigerants or even higher in some applications. But at the same time, we need to consider that they need to be properly selected for the appropriate application. They need to be well integrated into well-designed systems which exist and managed under strict safety protocol. So of course, no one of these qualifications I was listing now removes the importance of the safety, but we should not confuse, and here I'm being very careful with that, we should not confuse flammability with unsafety. Flammability, it doesn't mean that this is not safe. What matters is a proper application, a good engineering, appropriate standards, and qualified technicians to operate the systems. In terms of costs, for example, the domestic heat pumps based on hydrocarbons compared to other low GWP refrigerants, as here I'm listing, are 152A or 1234YF. They are actually, they present some cost benefits.
With that said, let's jump into our kickoff session on accelerating transformation. We just learned that timing, the question how fast can the transition take place, is an issue, and we are really happy to focus on the demand side right now for ACs and chillers. And I would like to welcome Joseph Buffo, who is the first country, that's the first country perspective right now. And he is the head of the Climate Change and Ozone Department at the Environmental Protection Authority in Ghana. Hello, Joseph. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, everything is fine.
All right, okay. I'm going to do a presentation on the accelerating green cooling market demands in Ghana. As we are very much aware, the world is transitioning to more environmentally friendly refrigerants and appliances. So Ghana is taking up this challenge, being a signatory to the Montreal Protocol, is ensuring that this transition is well suited or is well entrenched in every activity that we are doing. Next slide, please. Okay, just a brief background. You know, Ghana is situated in the region, West Africa. It's quite hot, and lately climate change is making everything quite hotter, and that is resulting in increasing air conditioning in the system. In fact, the air conditioning sector is one that is rapidly growing. As at 2025, we had about 400,000 ACs that are imported just for 2025. So that tells you that a lot of people are now shifting to cool themselves. And this is putting some pressure in terms of national energy infrastructure and greenhouse gas emissions. If you look at our total inventory in terms of emissions for the country, ACs contribute about 80% of that in terms of national emissions. And in fact, most of these ACs that are coming in are split ACs. And unfortunately, they are low efficient fixed speed AC, so they consume a lot of power. So that also drives the energy consumption so far as these ACs are concerned. Annually, we are consuming about 5.5 terawatts so far as energy consumption from this sector is concerned. And that is projected to increase to about 11 terawatts by 2050. So that is something we need to look at very strictly when energy is not that easy to generate in our part of the world, and we still have some issues with power generation. If you look at greening, we are doing our best. We are trying to transition to R290. In fact, as a policy, that is where we are trying to make sure that air conditions transition to R290 ACs. In fact, we're also looking at the variable speed air conditioners that consume less and that would impact less on the energy demand. If you look at the two graphs that are below, that shows the trend in energy consumption in CO2 emissions for the sector. And if you look at the one on the left, you see that for unitary air conditioners, that is the highest in terms of emissions. If you look at the one on the right, you're looking at power consumption, and still unitary air conditioners are still taking the lead. And this is the reason why we need to actually do something about this to make sure that we can reduce emissions and also bring in more low energy consumption appliances, and also be able to transition to the green AC. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are a number of things that Ghana is doing. In fact, some of these activities we started about 10 years back with GIZ having a good support in ensuring whatever we are doing. We are also implementing the HPMP and KIP programs that are also putting in a lot of activities or finance that is supporting activities that are ensuring that we're able to transition effectively to refrigerants that are more beneficial to the environment. First on the list is, I'll go into details on this just to touch up on some of the things in relation to the projects that are ensuring this transitioning. In fact, we've done a lot of R290 work. We have been training technicians, and that is something that is ongoing. We ensure that R290, that is flammable refrigerant, is taken care of when the technician is going to the field or having to install, decommission, or whatever as far as the appliance is concerned. So we want to make sure that through the Click Green Cooling project, we are able to have that supply of R290 into the country. In fact, the policy is to look at 70% of R290 in the mix so far as 2030 is concerned. That is still not too far away. And looking at the number of green appliances, I mentioned that there's about 3,000 that we have in the system. And it is normal. We still have a very, very long way to go. And these are some of the approaches. The Green Cooling project is looking at about 150,000 ACs during the entire span of the project. And that, at least, is going to be quite significant in ensuring that we transition to green ACs. We also have the Green Air Condition project that is being supported by the International Climate Initiative and the BMU. And in fact, this is one project because we realize that getting green ACs into the country has been a bit challenging. I'll talk a little more about that in the challenge part. Most of the companies that we intend to import from, particularly China, it's not that they don't want to send the appliance to the country, but they are a bit skeptical in terms of the flammability. I remember when we first imported some of these R290 ACs to the country through a particular company, they had to send their representatives to train our people, even though we have done some training of the technicians, just to be sure that there is no hazard associated with whatever they have to do. So that tells you that it is important to probably look at shifting that importation to assembly. And the GRACE project is going to make sure that at least we're able to have some assembly in the country of this R290. And in fact, this is going to be the first in Africa if we're able to do that. And that is something we are pushing very hard to make sure that it is done. I think I've mentioned about roadmap. We've had inventories, we have roadmaps, and roadmap actually gives a blueprint of how we intend to transition to greening when it comes to cooling appliances. So that is something that we are seriously looking at and following very seriously to make sure that all the aspects that we need to look at to make sure that technicians are trained, there's good supply of the appliances, in terms of awareness, the population or the public understand what they have to choose. These are things that are very much embedded in the roadmap and that we intend to fully implement. So ultimately, if you look at emission reductions, we are looking at up to 1.3 metric tons CO2 emissions by 2030. That is fully embedded in our NDCs. You know, I also talk about that, but at the end of the day, by 2050, you want to have about 3.7 metric tons reduction compared to the BAU scenario when it comes to the cooling sector. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I think I mentioned about key projects that are supporting us to transition to these R290 ACs. I mentioned about the green cooling program. The green cooling program is looking at bringing in ACs. This is something we are doing under a collect-funded project. We want to kind of make sure that we can have some finances in terms of supporting the program. So ultimately, the carbon market opportunity is there, and this is where we are drawing our support from to leverage whatever funding that we can be able to get. So this project is making sure that R290 ACs are in the country, we bring them in the country, and some incentive is provided for those who procure it. There's also an arrangement in terms of training and the end-of-life management because once you change the AC, it's not going back to the market. The old one will have to be taken care of in terms of dismantling and management. And that is another aspects that we are looking at. So that we can look at the entire life cycle of ones that are old and even the ones that are new that probably needs to be managed, probably doesn't go just into the market, but then managed and get off the market. So basically, that is what the green cooling project is doing. And in all, we're also looking at awareness creation. You know, most of the population don't really appreciate some of these things, even though we've done a number of awareness, but I can bet you that we have a lot of literates who still don't have a good appreciation of some of these things when we talk about them, because they are trying to look at how cheap the appliance is. That makes a good sense to them, but they're not looking at it in the long term as to, okay, over time, even if it is not that cheap, the benefits outweigh if you buy a cheaper one and you're paying more in the end. So these are the kind of education or kind of awareness that is going out to make sure that people understand and appreciate that they actually go in, and there are other interventions that we're also putting in to make sure that the population understands and appreciate that they need to move on from the old appliance to the new appliance. I already mentioned about 3,000 R290 ACs are in the country ongoing. I'm sure we should have more coming up in the coming years. We've trained about 400 plus. In fact, the National Ozone Unit has trained over 1,000 air-conditioned technicians. The project with GIZ, we've trained about 400 plus, and that is also a very good number in terms all over the country, so that we can have anywhere that you have to install any of these ACs, we can confidently say that a technician has the understanding of installing and the risk that's associated with installing the appliance. And in fact, we are working with 3 active brands, Media, Hisense, and of course, that is also always a challenge, because we don't have a lot of people who are companies that are importing. But at the end of the day, we hope to make sure that we get a lot of companies in the stream so that we can upskill the imports of R290 ACs. Next slide, please.
I'm really sorry. Your time is already up, so I have to ask you to move faster, because we need to come to an end to your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is talking about the assembly line. I think that is something that is going to help upskill R290 in the system. At least we are going to have it done. So that is something that will make sure that we have reduced unit cost, supply security, and regional leadership when it comes to the use of R290 ACs. Next slide, please. So one key thing that we're also trying to do is that we have tried to get information out there, and this is how come we are coming up with this label. This label talks about the benefits as far as the green AC is concerned. So all these labels are going to be on the AC so that the consumer can understand or appreciate what benefit is getting so far as the unit is concerned. In fact, the barcode gives further information and gives more understanding of how much you're even saving per year in terms of if you buy such an appliance. So this goes to support all other activities that we are doing, the green cooling, the green project, and also the technicians training that we are doing. One thing that we're also doing is to make sure that we are deploying a certification program so that at least all the technicians who we are training will have to be qualified in a way that they have to sit for an exam and get a certificate to practice. This is something we are rolling out this year, and this also go a long way to benefit the upscale of R290 or the use of R290 in the system. Next slide, please. So in fact, these are some of the challenges. I'm not going to go into details on them. In fact, we need to make sure that the appliances are taken care of at the end of life. We don't have a lot of them on the market, so we need to make sure that we actually have them. High upfront cost is something that we have to deal with, but eventually the incentives are going to support that. We have a number of technicians that still need to be trained. Low awareness, we need to increase that because the average Ghanaian find difficulty appreciating some of these things. And for our kids, our baseline is low, and we need to make sure that at least we're able to transition as fast as possible. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, I think I've already talked about that. We included the cooling sector in our NDCs, and that's something that we are basically looking at. And the carbon market approach is going to help us solve some finding because our activity is unconditional. It means that it's conditional. It means that we need support to be able to implement it. Next slide. Next slide, please. I think for this one, yes. So for us, I think we should be able to move, looking at everything that I've talked about. There's a good chance that we can leapfrog to 290. We're actually leapfrogging. And very soon, we are hoping that once everything falls in place, we should be able to transition and also manage the end of life. One key thing that we are doing is that we are partnering with a private company to actually deal with the refrigerant destruction and also the foam destruction. And that is also a good news so that at least the entire life cycle of an appliance is taken care of in the country. So ultimately, yes, we should be able to leapfrog, we should be able to address these challenges, and we should be able to make sure that Ghana, at the end of the day, is able to meet its Montreal Protocol obligations and also be able to address challenges that prevents leapfrogging to 290 and make sure that at least we're on a good path to address the environmental challenges that come from the cooling sector. Thank you very much. I think this is the end of my presentation, and I'm still here. If there are any questions, I'm available to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you very much for sharing Ghana's perspective. And we do have questions in the chat, so maybe if the team or even you would like to get to the questions via the chat, that would be highly appreciated. Thank you, Joseph. And with no further ado, we are going to invite our next speaker for this session, William Milao, and we are going to listen to Kenya's perspective. And William Milao is from the National Ozone Unit of Kenya and is Assistant Coordinator of the National Ozone Unit, which is based in the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. Hello, William. Nice to see you. The floor is yours. We're going to start the presentation and then you can hand. Okay, perfect. And then the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julika. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's my pleasure to be the next presenter. Like you mentioned, my name is Mela William from the National Ozone Unit, and greetings from Kenya. Next slide, please. So Kenya is happy that we have this year, from January, done the last quarter for R22, which means that Kenya now is compliant to basically phasing out the R22. It's the last year, and the current refrigerant which is available in the market, which is being used, is fixed units operating under R410 refrigerant. But having said that, the leakage rate has been really high in the past, and this is from the Kenya RAC inventory, which is done in 2022, and also National Cooling Action Plan, that the refrigerant leakage split for air condition system estimated to generate approximately 5.1 million tons of CO2 equivalent emission between 2020 and 2030. The air conditioning system accounts nearly 50% of total emission from the refrigerant and air condition rack sector, making it most of the largest contributors in the greenhouse gas emission. We expect this to project to quite a number of between 46%, especially on the issues of electricity consumption, between 135 and 217 gigawatts of electricity annually. Next slide, please. The emission from electricity consumption by air conditioners is expected to reach approximately 0.677 to 1.1 megatons of CO2 equivalent by the year 2030. And this has made us now to really move forward to the issue of leapfrogging and look at the energy efficiency, the advantage of the R290 technologies, the air conditioners, though they are still not very available in the country, but we are in partnership with GIZ, and we have done about 3 containers so far, and others we expect to come into the country so that we can address the issue of electricity consumption as well as the effects to the environment. Next slide, please. Then this is mentioned from the statistics that we have. You can see how the projection and what we're trying to project by the year 2050. You will see how from 2010, the continuous rising. In 2020, we had a small drop, but you see now steadily rising, and therefore the projection by 2030, we expect to be 8 megatons. Then that's for unitary air conditioner, domestic refrigeration, chillers, mobile conditioning, industrial refrigeration, and so on. Next slide, please.
Pero buenas, ¿cierto?
In the next slide, you will notice that yes, you notice that in the domestic, sorry, there is a competition on the background. You notice that in the domestic current and projected energy use of analyzed, it's from 2010. That's how that projection is taking place, and industrial refrigeration, as well as the mobile air conditioner, commercial refrigeration, chillers, so on, and we project this to increase all until 2050. Next slide, please. So mentioned earlier, considering the effects that we have to the environment, the effect that we have on energy consumption, Kenya has been working really with MLF through the German government and the French government for over 30 years now, a very strong relationship, introduced natural refrigerant, We have also done the QCR of trainers and technicians. We have trained we have done rack inventory, development of national cooling action plan. We have also done a lot in training of rack technicians across many institutions. Try to understand even before we go to leapfrogging, we have done before, and now also encouraging them to learn more about these refrigerants. Then under the HPMP, we have also done under the International Climate Initiative, funded by the Green Cooling Initiative, Green ACs, that is a GRACE project. Kenya is now establishing incentives of R290 supply chain and demonstrating project, as well as equipped 28 centers with the R290 ACs, and is training many technicians in this. The training institution, we have some of them centers of excellence, as we are developing certain in each region, seeing possibilities of having centers of excellence. Kenya is actively promoting natural refrigerants in the market, and this is under the National Cooling Action Plan and the Kigali Implementation Plan, which we were initially and about to start its implementation. We have done RAC as a priority mitigation action in the technical analysis report updated the NDC 2025, and we're hoping to submit this data to for the NDC in 2025, with the RAC being included. So introduction of R290 and R32 ACs can really lead to reduction in emissions, and we expect to continue this annually and improve until 2050 to reduce the projections. Next slide, please. Thank you for Kenya. Kenya has quite a number of challenges, which is, of course, having phased out R22 units. I mean, many units still use R22, which means they can no longer be serviced. So we won't need to look at these possibilities. How will the end life look like? And we also require to reduce HFC consumption under the Kigali Implementation Plan, which calls for the market to increase its shares of R290, and we want to encourage many partners to come on board, maybe just make it available R290. And also there is need to strengthen R290 supply chain at all levels, and also train more technicians. We hear many cases of people not knowing how to deal with it, so that they can do the very basic as brazing, very basic as keeping safe, and also how to store and work on R290 ACs. Next slide, please. The H1P GRACE project, which is providing an opportunity for us to import more of R290 ACs. And
yes, there we are, back again. So once again, we are very, very sorry for that hiccup. I see that we are back on track now with the opportunities, and now we just have to wait for William to be selected as our dear speaker. Sorry, William, and we are going to hand over to you to please finish your presentation and let us in on the opportunities that you have to offer. There you are, William Malau. You can proceed now.
Thank you very much. And so I was in the opportunities that currently we have as a country under the GRACE project of importing some R290 ACs to reduce unit costs, raise awareness, expand the pool of trainers and technicians. You know, you never get enough of the training of technicians. There are quite a number that still needs to be trained. So this opportunity is key for Kenya. Then we have done the National Environment Management Authority, which is under the Ministry of Environment. We are doing the label highlighting the advantages of R290. You can see the example of the label in there. It's not yet used. It's still under the final approval, but very soon you will be seeing in our Kenya's refrigerants or refrigerators or ACs. In addition, the regional minimum energy performance standards, which were adopted in the year 2025 by the Kenya Bureau of Standards or the Regional Bureau of Standards, have ranked R290 ACs among the highest in energy efficiency, which is really important milestone for us to promote this R290 or green refrigeration. The training institution, which you mentioned earlier on, that have so far received support, will continue receiving support and will be equipped with R290 units to support the training of students and technicians, so that the students from where they are, they can be easily access these services. So, and also we did mention earlier on that now we are dealing with the issue of refrigerant end of life, as well as, so we're happy to announce that the opportunity we have had with CSE funded project, that this end of life will be managed, and we want to see the possibility of having a destruction facility here in Kenya, the ozone depleting substances, instead of exporting them initially to other regions like South Africa for destruction. Next slide, please. So as I conclude, colleagues, I'd like to highlight the importance of availability of R290. That is very important to have it in the country as many as quantities, because of the economies of scale. The prices will hopefully come down, and we'll have different models. Then the cooling capacity and so on. But the low awareness level or insufficient number of trained technicians still remain high, and there's need to increase this market share, like I mentioned earlier on, support compliance of HFC reduction targets under the Kigali Implementation Plan, which Kenya is currently spearheading and partnering with the relevant department on the Paris Agreement, so that we have the relationship between Kigali and the Paris Agreement on this. Then also, in addition, the management of end life handling of old to air conditioners training, refrigerant remaining still require attention and support, so that those that are still at large, we can request them to be basically collected and destroyed in a manner which is sound to the environment. I think that's the last slide. I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm available for more questions. And on behalf of the organizers body for the HITCH, maybe it confused the flow of the presentations. Thank you, and back to you, Julika.
Thank you so much, William, for your presentation.